Ahoy there, fellow viewers! Welcome to another tutorial. Today, we'll be showing you how to build your own ship, so you can sail to the far reaches of our server. This ship will be a small caravel-rigged cog. This is the block palette we will be using to construct our seaworthy vessel. So, without any further ado, let's get to it. To better illustrate the process, we will be building half of the ship for a while to show the spacing and mapping of the decks, and be using red wool to better illustrate the shape of our hull. You'll need a 2D frame to establish the basic shape of your ship as well as its length, making sure you trace your fore and aft castles, masts, and bowsprit. The decks can be better placed after the overall shell of your structure is complete. For this ship, we'll only have an aft castle, which is marked in yellow. As a general rule of thumb, for almost any ship, your main mast should be anywhere within 3 to 4 blocks of your ship's length, with all other masts being shorter in size to the main mast, respectively. As this ship only has one sail, we'll make it around the same length. Over at the bowsprit, you want it to be long enough for the rigging that comes down from the top of the mast, but any length that feels appropriate is suitable. This can be tweaked later on in the process. Once you are happy with your shape, you'll want to go above and trace the 2D width of your hull. Your ship should be at its widest towards the middle and closer to the front. That'll also be the shape of your main deck, or weather deck, the uppermost floor that runs from bow to stern. Once you've done that, it's time to create the levels, as seen here. Match your trace to the framed trace of the ship. This will help establish the curve in your deck levels. If you need to change things, don't worry. The beauty of these early stages are that you can continue to easily modify the shape of your ship for any details you may want to add later in the build. Now it's time to create the ribs of the vessel. This part is fairly straightforward. Again, you want the curvature of the vessel to be mostly towards the middle, and the further back you go, the more narrow your ship should become. Note, the scale of this will vary from ship to ship, but the premise is the same. You want your keel, the bottom of the ship, to be fairly rounded off, almost but not completely flat, on the majority of your hull, like so. Once you're happy with the way your ribs have turned out, it's finally time to fill in the hull. This process can be undertaken in any way you like. However, I find it is usually easy to start from the bottom of the keel. This process is mostly trial and error. All you want to do is get a nice bowl shape for the hull below the waterline and a smooth curve around the bow. When you are happy with that, map and fill in the decks. Make sure there is enough headspace to walk around. You don't want to give your crew a concussion on the high seas. Now we can bring back the full shape of our vessel, like so. Let's take a look at our mast. Since we're going with a caravel, our sail will be a lateen, a triangular sail that can be easily moved. Make sure the connection of the sail to the mast is somewhere in the middle of the exposed pillar. Depending on the angle of your sail and how much wind you want to illustrate being caught, you can use many different angles. We'll want a flatter sail for this one to give it a sleeker look. First, map out the shape of your sail. Make sure the bottom has a slight curve upwards. This will act as a guideline when you start to shape your sail to the wind. After that, you can start shaping the sail itself. Start by slanting the pole holding the sail. Then do the same to your sail outline. After that, you can start filling it in with straight lines, just to fill up that negative space. Once that's completed, it's time to summon the wind. Start adding curves to your sail, to illustrate the winds of the high seas or rivers. Excellent. We shall now turn our focus to the hull. We're going to add the visual ribs of the ship using oak planks. The effect will be subtle with our block palette, but it helps to add some character to the vessel. We will be tracing horizontal and vertical lines on both sides. Towards the front and the back, you will see that we trace the edges of the shapes. The purpose of this is to demonstrate the frame of your ship, which adds a level of realism to the shipbuilding aspect of the structure. You will also need to place the main horizontal rib one block above the waterline. Once you're happy with your skeleton tracing, it's time to add some exterior detailing. We're going to smooth the silhouette of the ship by using slabs, stairs, trapdoors, and buttons. For some details, such as these corner stairs, you can use a debug stick to select the positions. Make sure to knock some holes out for the windows above the waterline. In this instance, we've added them in the aft castle of our cog. Be sure to also add stairs to the lower deck and to the top of the aft castle. We will also be building out our bowsprit and offsetting it to the left or port side of the ship. This will add some dynamic to your small vessel, although for larger vessels such as galleons and carracks, you'll want to keep them centralized. The rigging is sometimes the most tricky part of your ship. You will need to use a debug stick in some areas to achieve certain effects. You want the shape of your rigging to feel taut or streamlined, but also making visible the looseness and curvature of the ropes. We'll start with the forestay, the line of rigging that runs from the highest point of your mast to the furthest point of your bowsprit. When you reach about halfway down the length of the line, you want to move it over by one block and continue a similar repeated pattern down to the bowsprit, like so. Once you're happy with that, we do a similar thing with the backstay, just like the forestay, but it runs towards the furthest part of the stern. Finally, let's connect the front of the sail to the starboard side of the ship, like so, and do the same with the corner of the lateen sail at the back. Our last section of rigging will be the rope ladder leading up to the top of the mast and the rope that runs from the top of the lateen down to the deck, which allows the sailors to adjust the angle of the sail to capture more wind or to bring the sail down for repairs. Lastly, just go back over some areas of the rigging where you want to remove the fence connections like so. It gives a cleaner look to your ship, as well as removing any of the messy connections with other lines of fences, such as these. With the rigging out of the way, we enter the final stages of construction. We will be adding the railings, partitions, support beams, and other details to complete our vessel. For your portholes, you'll want to add some fences like so, on the side and outside, and some beams on the side to accentuate the section. We will also add some horizontal beams in the middle of the hull. This is called Jacob's Ladder, and you'll see many wooden vessels fitted with this detail, and it still exists today in the form of rope ladders for much larger ships. We will also add ropes to our mast at relative intervals, which will assist our sailors in executing many jobs at sea and add stability to our mast. We will also add a cover for where our sea bell will be hung from. And below, we will add our partitions and section off the captain's cabin. We can now add the beams in the lower deck as supports and some beams across the stairs for some added details to give the sense of a frame. We will also close off the cargo hatch that we created earlier. This is a hatch that can be lifted and lowered to allow cargo to be moved below more freely. It can be a little tricky, just be sure to use the spaces above and below the hatch to create the checkered effect. Last, but by no means least, we can add cargo into our seafaring vessel. You can use barrels, crates, player heads, off crates, and also wooden beds that can act as longer and thinner crates. In the captain's cabin, We just add a chest, a table with a cloth, and a bed, using the cloth mat and trapdoor with a beam as its support. A table and chair with a candle in case they need to look at charts or write letters in the middle of the night, and maybe a tankard of ale or rum for the long days ahead. Don't forget to add a flag of your choice in colour and shape. Just make sure it's flapping in the direction your ship is sailing. With some nautical magic, our red wool is replaced with brown planks. Lastly, to cap it all off, we can install our sea bell and release our ship's colours. And there you have it. Our caravel-rigged cog is ready to be launched. Isn't she a beauty? Now climb aboard, you jacktars. We have a world to explore.